I love you, Cleveland, and I love you, Ohio, and a very pleasant welcome once again to Bonus Time with Drennan. Here on the Big Play Network, very excited to be back with you in this format and this venue, the gorgeous studios located, state-of-the-art, really, at the Burke Lakefront Airport, and so happy to be part of the staff now with so many talented people and well-known celebrities from the Cleveland area. We have a lot to cover on today's show. Certainly the NFL. The Browns, of course, were in a bye week. We're going to dive into the college ball. Also, the Cavaliers started their exhibition season, preseason games, and other news in the world of sports. So let me welcome at this time Ryan Smith, my producer. How are you this week, sir?
I'm doing great, Bruce. It's always a good Wednesday when I see you walk into the office, so I'm excited to be here and excited for another episode of Bonus Time.
Well, I want to get started with the Browns being in a bye week because the important factor is Watson. Now, what is the latest that we have on Watson? I know he's been working out. I saw him. There were reports by Stefanski he couldn't raise his arm above his shoulder. He's doing exercises like that now. Is it all systems go? Last report, Ryan. Is he going to be able to answer the bell against San Francisco?
Well, I'll tell you what. It's trending downward, it seems like, on the Twitter sphere. So fingers crossed. However, that rotator cuff injury came out yesterday, and it's not looking great.
Well, even if he does play, I think we're in trouble. I mean, San Francisco, and we've already touched on this, are they not looking like the best team top to bottom in the entire National Football League? And that includes Kansas City, the defending champions. Philadelphia, even though they're undefeated, and they've got to be given credit for that, has not looked great in their victories. They've actually skated a couple of, they've escaped a couple of times. But not that they're not a very good team. They are. But again, I contend had Purdy not gotten hurt a year ago, that Frisco may have gone on to win that NFC Championship game against Philadelphia and would have given, I think, Kansas City a little better battle. All hypothetical, of course. But the point, getting back to our team, is that even with Watson, and here's the tragedy of it, it looked like he was starting to make a little progress. It looked like the comfort zone was a little better for him. It looked like the guys were getting acclimated to him a little more. So we needed that with the way that the defense started off the season so tremendously. And again, as I said last week, I don't blame the defense for the Baltimore loss. They were on the field practically the whole game because we had this tremendous record up until the Baltimore game of our defense forcing more 3-and-outs than any other team by far in the National Football League. Well, in the Baltimore game, it was just flip-flop. We were the ones that were 3-and-out offensively because the kid just isn't ready. And in case you missed our show last week, you missed a lot. I have been saying all throughout the preseason when people would come up, boy, this kid looks great out of UCLA, but I let it go in one ear and go out. Now, he may turn out to be a very good quarterback. Who knows? But you cannot put whatever a kid does in preseason, fresh out of college, as a barometer to what will happen when he is introduced to the big boys in regular season action. So when I heard that Watson wasn't going to be able to play in that last game, I said, oh, brother, we are in big trouble. And that will persist as long as Watson cannot answer the bell. And even if he can, what percentage do we put on him? What percentage do the doctors say he is? Is he at 80%, 90%, or less? I can't see them playing him if he is less. But it's a major, major concern for all of us pertaining to the rest of the season. So I'm distressed to hear that you're saying, Ryan, that the general vibe is that he won't be able to play against San Francisco?
So the general vibe, according to the Browns organization, is they're sticking with that he is day to day. However, I don't expect them to change their way of telling the fans and the media that's changed. So he's medically cleared to play. We know that. However, Kevin Stefanski said he's not functionally ready to play. And I don't exactly know what that entails, but we know he's definitely going through some pain.
Well, he was medically cleared to play by the last game.
Exactly.
And it wasn't until the warm-ups that he scratched himself or the coaches scratched him, whatever. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that we were exposed without him in there. And you can second-guess Stefanski for his play calling all you want. I do not blame Stefanski. What's he going to do? Change on a spur of the moment? He's got 10 minutes when he realizes in the pregame that Watson can't answer the bell, so now he's got to change his entire game plan? Of course not. That's an impossibility. Barry, who I have complimented to the nth degree for what he's done on paper in drafting and signing free agents, did make a glaring mistake by letting Dobbs go. Not that Dobbs is the second coming of Earl Morrall. Old-timers, you'll remember Earl Morrall, back up to Johnny Unitas. Ryan, you probably don't have a clue.
I have no idea, Bruce, but I'm going to take your word for it.
One of the greatest backups of all time. The point is that now, if Watson can't play against San Francisco, I guess this Walker steps in.
Yep.
So there we are. Now, at least he's got a little NFL experience. But don't get excited. San Francisco's a 4.5-point favorite. And
so, Bruce, the line actually moved to -6.
yeah,
If that tells us some things.
You know what? I didn't check them this morning before I came into work, but it was 4.5. And yesterday, I was playing golf, and I mentioned to a guy that the Browns were a 4.5-point favorite, and another fellow said, "Is that all?" And it dawned on me, yeah. So all of a sudden I started thinking, because I know how Vegas operates, why was it only 4.5? Which gave me hope for the Browns. But now Ryan says the line this morning has jumped up to 6. It's going to go even higher if Watson can't play. And I wouldn't be surprised, because of the uncertainty of Watson, that Vegas may pull that game off the card, at least until they have a better idea of whether Watson can play or not. Because the line, if it's 6, if it went from 4.5 to 6, with the idea that Watson has been medically cleared to play, and then we find out that he's not going to play, I mean, 6 looks like a pretty good bet for San Francisco, with Typico, of course. Don't forget with Typico. But that's going to be jumping up to maybe double figures. No?
I would assume so. And Bruce, how about this? A little breaking news, if you want to call it that. So Deshaun Watson, who usually speaks to the media on Wednesdays,
yes,
he is not scheduled to talk today, if that tells you something.
What should I read into that? One side of the coin is, what is there for him to say? The other side of the coin is he would be bombarded with questions about his shoulder. So it is what it is. But I'm very, 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 very concerned. And then, in the bigger picture, what does this mean? What does this mean for the season, which is the second year of his contract? Remember, as I told you a couple of weeks ago, when we started this show, the clock is ticking because of that contract. Very few teams in the history of the playoffs, since the AFL and the NFL merged and we started this Super Bowl very few teams who have gone through a long drought of not making the playoffs make the playoffs and go to the Super Bowl that first year. It just doesn't happen. So if we don't make the playoffs this year, now next year is the third year of a 5-year contract, and we make the playoffs, you get your feet wet. So now you've only got 2 years left on that contract. And this is all under the assumption that Watson will find his old self and really blossom into the championship quarterback that we all kind of recognize he has the potential to be because of his God-given talent. Again, let me emphasize, we don't yet know if he has it here or here. We don't yet know that. Okay, with that being said, let me kind of recap what happened in the NFL this last weekend and pertaining to the Browns and then the other conference as well, because there were some interesting revelations. One occurred in London. Jacksonville beating Buffalo. When Buffalo had just come off annihilating Miami, after Miami the week before annihilated Denver and set all kinds of scoring records. What do they say? Any given Sunday?
Any given Sunday. And you know what they usually say, that Jacksonville has the advantage. It's more of a home game for other teams. However, I did see quite a few Bills fans in the crowd in London.
What? I don't want to get sidetracked. What franchise do you think Goodell and the NFL would put over there? Or would they expand?
I don't know, Bruce. And the whole thing is, people argue that with the traveling, they don't know if that's a good idea to make an expansion team because of the unfair advantages that would propose, but it would definitely be interesting.
Well, the traveling would really be a mess if you got to go to the West Coast or vice versa. Even the Midwest or the South, Southwest. The Texas teams, Arizona. But anyway, how do you figure out Buffalo?
They're a very weird team, and Josh Allen, before that game, showed he was kind of the front runner for the MVP after annihilating Miami, as you mentioned. And then you go to London, you kind of stall on offense. I believe they only put up 20 points, and that last touchdown saved them from getting blown out. So they're a hard team to gauge.
We're about at the 1/3 mark of this NFL campaign, with most teams playing 5 games now. However, even with it still being very early, I have to make this observation that Buffalo, to me, appears to still be quite a ways from being able to dethrone the Kansas City Chiefs here in the AFC. I'm sorry. I just can't. When they have, I'm not taking anything away from Jacksonville, because with Trevor Lawrence and company, now that Urban Meyer's out of the picture, they're a team that could very well make the playoffs again. And again, because they got their feet wet a year ago, you don't know what's going to happen. So there's that. But Pittsburgh beating Baltimore.
Mike Tomlin magic.
There is absolutely no way Pittsburgh should have won that game. John Harbaugh has got to be tossing and turning in his sleep and having nightmares of the way that his team lost that game. There is absolutely no excuse for them to lose that game. And Pittsburgh, as they do so many times, found a way to win. They find ways to win. They depended on their defense, to their credit, and they found a way to win a game that they had no business winning. And what did I tell you when we started this show? I said it wouldn't surprise me if the 4 teams in the AFC North go 3-3 against one another. And 10-7 is going to be a good enough record to win this division. I think 11-6 is a shoo-in. I haven't swayed from that at all. So ponder that, which gives the Browns hope, but only if we get Watson back. If you don't have a quarterback, forget it. And, what is this? A Walker going to be the Messiah or something? Come on. So anyway, there was that. So Baltimore's really got to be kicking themselves. I'll tell you a team that I am very curious about, and I think it's healthy for the NFL. The Detroit Lions. They won very decisively against Carolina, who's hapless this year. They're winless. But Detroit all of a sudden is 4-1, and the game they lost was an overtime game. Maybe we'll finally be entertained on Thanksgiving Day. What a bummer pig of a game that's been. Not that you have pork on Thanksgiving, but I think Detroit's an interesting team with Goff and company. I really do.
I agree with you, Bruce. And like you said, I think it is very good for the NFL. We know that, like you mentioned, the Lions and the Browns are unfortunately two of the teams that were prior to, not expansion franchise that have failed to make a Super Bowl. Yeah, and I'm excited to see the Lions. I think Dan Campbell brings a lot of energy to the NFL, and Jared Goff has been playing very, very well. Yeah.
And hindsight, look at that trade now with Stafford. Not that Stafford, he's very good and he won him a Super Bowl, but I mean, in the bigger picture, in the long run, that may have been a godsend of a trade for the Lions after this long drought that they have experienced over the years. Here's another story I got to jump on from last week in the NFL. To see the expression on Belichick's puss was delightful. Not that I don't consider him the greatest NFL coach of all time. People would argue, well, he had Brady. But Chuck Noll had the Steel Curtain defense and fabulous weapons on offense with Bradshaw, Swan, Stallworth, etc. Shula's Dolphins had the no-name defense, plus Greasy, Zonka, Kick, and Morris. Walsh at Frisco had Montana and Gerald Rice and Taylor and Roger Craig, tremendous talent too. So, I mean, you could say that about Belichick, but the fact of the matter is, let's give credit where it's due. But I still took particular delight in seeing him totally frustrated. 34-0. And
you know what's even funnier about that, Bruce? Last week on Bonus Time, you were telling me about how bad that brutal loss was, one of the worst in Belichick's career. And yes. What did we see? We see another horrible loss, maybe even worse than the loss to the Cowboys getting shut out back-to-back.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan. I did some further research. New England is 2-7 straight up and 1-8 against the spread in their last 9 games. And New England has been beaten by 30-plus points 2 weeks in a row. That's the first time that's happened since 1970. Oh!
It's a long time.
So, and did you see them, the fans in New England?
They're getting restless.
You darn right they are.
They're getting too used to success.
They're the most spoiled fan. After Brady left, okay, a couple of years, you give Belichick, but not anymore. The fans forget very quickly. Mentioning Buffalo's loss in London, Miami bounced back very impressively against a terrible New York Giants team. They improved to 4-1 with a 31-16 victory. And Miami's for real. They are definitely for real. And I'll be curious to see how that second game goes when they play against Buffalo. That'll be one to really keep our eyes upon. Indianapolis won a back-and-forth game with their division rival, the Tennessee Titans, who, of course, we handled because of our tremendous defensive effort and just enough of an offense that game by Watson and company to get the job done. But this was a back-and-forth game between these two rivals in the AFC South, and Indianapolis prevailed 23-16 to take command to 3-2, along with Jacksonville. But Tennessee now 2-3, and I think that's going to go right down to the wire between those three teams. And Houston looks to be improved, believe it or not. That's amazing, too. Cincinnati did what they had to do. This is the best Burrow has looked. He finally looked healthy. They did a job on Arizona 34-20, and they are now back in the mix at 2-3. So let's not discount Cincinnati, particularly because of last year as an example and a barometer that we can go by. They got off to a terrible start last year, too. And look what happened.
Yeah, I believe they were 0-2 and rattled off, I believe it was 8 straight, and they were one of the hottest teams, if not headed into the playoffs.
Yeah. And the defense is too good to keep playing as poorly as they had up to this point, but they get a much-needed victory against Arizona. Philadelphia, I mentioned earlier, improves to 5-0 with their 23-14 victory over the L.A. Rams. And Philadelphia, an interesting team, the defending NFC champions. We'll see if they can prevail and do that again. I don't think they will, unless some catastrophic injuries occur to San Francisco. And I really don't know if there's anybody else in the NFC. You know, it's funny, so far, even though it's ridiculously early, this is reminding me of the way the NBA used to be, not necessarily anymore, but the way they used to be in the NBA before the season would start. You could take 2, maybe 3 teams and say one of these teams is going to win the NBA championship. In hockey, you could say that about 20 teams because they put the ceiling in the basement in. Blew away that one season. But this year in the NFL, I mean, is there anybody in the NFC besides Philadelphia and San Francisco? Is there anybody in the AFC besides Kansas City and Buffalo right now? Or Miami? You could sneak Miami in there, I guess. That's why I said, let's see how Miami does second time around against Buffalo.
Yeah, the 49ers, well, however, whatever you want to call that game, destroyed the Cowboys, and that kind of quieted some of their hype. And besides that, the NFC looking pretty weak.
To go 5-0, I mean, they look absolutely fantastic. And they're our next opponent. And Kansas City improves to 4-1 with a 27-20 victory over the Minnesota Vikings. So there you have it, standings-wise. Our division, Pittsburgh, Baltimore tied. Pittsburgh's, improves their record to 2-0 in the division. Who would have thought? Baltimore now 2-1. We are at 1-2. Cincinnati's 0-2. And here we are. Now, the upcoming games in the NFL, besides our game against San Francisco, and Ryan informs us that line has gone from 4.5 up to 6. So keep that in mind. And that's all pending because of Watson and his status. Baltimore is a 3.5-point favorite on the road against Tennessee, and Vrabel's going to want a victory badly after the loss to Indianapolis, that's for sure. And they seem like a topsy-turvy team so far. Obviously, we stopped Henry, but that's no easy task, even for a Baltimore defense that's known for their physicality. But Baltimore, 3.5-point favorite in that affair. And I would think that Harbaugh is really rough on his team in practice this week after letting that Pittsburgh game slip through their fingers. Indianapolis is at Jacksonville, and that's a divisional matchup in the South with the Trevor Lawrence troops, a 4-point favorite in that game. Certainly, Seattle is at Cincinnati, and the Bengals are only a 2.5-point favorite over the Seahawks. Is Geno Smith hurt?
I believe he did get hurt at the end of near the end of that game when he got that sideline hit. That Geno Smith had some words. He did not like that, but I believe he's good to go Sunday.
Okay, that's an interesting story too about him. You know, he's out of West Virginia. He at best was a backup in the NFL. And now Carroll's giving him this green light. Detroit is a 3-point favorite at Tampa Bay. Oh, yeah, Tampa Bay. Why do I react like that? You know why. I want to see him keep it up.
I do too, Bruce. I do too.
No. I'm being facetious. I'm not being serious.
Come on.
I'm not a fan. I hated the commercials.
I did too. I thought they were a bit cheesy.
But this will be an interesting game because the Lions will be challenged by Mayfield and company down there in Tampa. And then last but not least, Dallas trying to bounce back after the humiliation against San Francisco is a 2.5-point favorite on the road against the LA Chargers. And that'll be a tough one for them because the Chargers are a good team. And I think that they are playoff caliber, no question. Do you agree?
I would agree. And the real only question with the Chargers is their defense. Justin Herbert has been balling out. Right. And obviously they lost Mike Williams. But you have Keenan Allen, one of the most consistent receivers over the last decade in the NFL. You have a really good-looking rookie in Quentin Johnson, and they still have, obviously, one of the best running backs in Austin Eckler. So they will be a force down the stretch.
Yeah, I think so, too. You got some football tweets?
Oh, boy, do I. You ready, Bruce?
I'm not sure, but go ahead.
All righty. First one comes from @TimeAgain2022 to the Browns. He says, doesn't matter. The 49ers are going to kick the Browns no matter what quarterback plays. Now, here's the fun part. He says, Browns should cut Watson, raise ticket prices so they can pay off his contract and find someone who is good and wants to play.
I think some of these fans are intentionally trying to get my ire up so I do a national viral rant again or something. But obviously, I think his original point is right on target. I don't even know if Watson's healthy, if that's going to enable us to beat San Francisco. I doubt it because San Francisco hasn't shown any cracks in the wall at all so far this year. So, okay, go on.
Alrighty, another Watson one. This one is from Peter Barani. He says, bearing some sort of miracle, this will be the worst trade in NFL history. Even worse than the Cowboys trading Herschel Walker to the Vikings for multiple first-round picks.
Oh, that was a very good. What's his name?
Peter Barani.
Peter, very good. I remember that deal vividly. That was Jimmy Johnson. That turned Dallas around and made them a Super Bowl champion under Jones. Very good observation on your part. Now, I hope you're wrong about Watson in our situation, but if you've watched me on TV or heard me on the radio over the years, you know that I have said that I advocate the deal by Haslam to get Watson because I didn't think we were going anywhere with Mayfield. But above and beyond that, you've got to have that championship quarterback. Very few exceptions in the history of the Super Bowl. You can count them on one hand when you've accomplished that great achievement without a championship quarterback. And we don't know if Watson has it in him again, here and here. But I also threw this out after making that statement over and over again. If we don't get to the Super Bowl within the 5-year contract and let alone win it, this will set the franchise back at least an additional 5 years. So your point is well taken. Okay, go ahead.
Alrighty, well, this one's a quick one from Homebrew Kev about Deshaun. He said he's got 2 arms. Just throw the ball with the other one.
Why not? You've seen Mahomes perfect that little, it's sort of like a volleyball toss. Anything else?
Alrighty, well, we got one more, and this one's a Halloween one talking about the season. We're getting close. Oh, well, that's the same Watson one. Here we go. This one is about candy corn. Another Kevin says, being that it's October, he wants to remind everyone that candy corn is an elite Halloween candy.
It's also terrible for your teeth.
Are you a fan of candy corn, Bruce?
No, because of my teeth. I had a lot of work done.
Alrighty.
So, and by the way, let me pass that. I got an estimate from a specialist. It's going to charge me $25,000. Golfing buddy of mine said, go to Case Western. Their dental school. It's one of the best in the country. Says they don't make mistakes because the supervisor's over their shoulder observing, and constantly I got all the work done that I got from the estimates from the specialist and much more for $10,000.
There you go.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. I want to dive into college ball when we resume with Bonus Time with Drennan on the Big Play Network. Now, here is the risk that Browns had to take with Love you, Cleveland. Love you, Ohio. Great to have you back with us. Bonus time with Drennan here on the Big Play Network, brought to you by Tipico. Bruce Drennan with you, along with Ryan Smith. And now it's time for us on this week's show to dive into the college ranks. Let's start with the rankings and what these teams did last week and what they've got forthcoming. Georgia, number one in the country, actually really established themselves again with a big 51-13 victory over Kentucky. It was much anticipated, and they were starting to. There were people raising their eyebrows about the Bulldogs around the country, but now with this victory, they're launched right back into the number one position. Even though Kentucky's a good team. And they are ranked.
Yeah, it was good to see Georgia finally, play to that elite level that we become accustomed to. And Carson Beck finally, had an amazing game.
Yeah. So Kentucky now drops from number 20 to 24 in the rankings because of the loss. But I'm glad that they didn't bounce them. AP, this is. I'm glad they didn't bounce them out of the top 25. All right, Michigan with a very impressive win over Minnesota, 52-10. I like that coach at Minnesota, but he just doesn't have the material to go up against a powerhouse Michigan team who's got everybody back from last year. So it was no surprise that the Wolverines advanced with that. But they haven't been tested yet. They haven't. We'll see. Ohio State with the big win over Maryland. And, the first half was very concerning. I don't know about you, but when you watch the first half of that game, you're thinking, what is going on? I'll tell you what. Maryland is a good team. They're a good team. The power and the physicality of Ohio State eventually, and the talent, eventually prevailed in that game. But you got to give Maryland credit. They're going to win their share of games, and they're going to a bowl game this year, and they better not be taken for granted in their bowl game, or they may catch somebody on their heels and beat them. But Ohio State with the big 20-point victory. And that covered, by the way. They were, I think, given 17 or 17 and a half.
By the skin of their teeth.
Yeah. Florida State with a win over Virginia Tech, no contest. They went from 5 to 4 in the rankings. This is the AP I'm referencing, and the Seminoles, real good team. They're for real this year. I watched that whole game against Clemson. And not the Clemson is, the Clemson of Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence this year, but they're still a darn good football team. All right, Oklahoma, Texas. Oh. First of all, I love both fight songs. Let's get that straight. But what a tremendously entertaining game. The Florida State-Clemson game, the Ohio State-Notre Dame game, and this Oklahoma-Texas game have been fantastic entertainment, college football entertainment, just fantastic. What a great battle in the Red River rivalry. Oklahoma winning 34-30. Texas thought they had him with the field goal at the end. That kid has ice in his veins, and Oklahoma comes right back down the field. Ewers, of course, the quarterback of Texas, transferred from Ohio State back to his home state and to Austin. Wow. Oklahoma was number 12 in the country in the AP poll. With the victory over Texas, they elevate themselves to number 5 now. Texas, who was number 3, drops down to number 9. Penn State, Washington, Oregon, all idle. Southern Cal, Caleb Williams. You talk about, Ryan, you talk about skin of the teeth. 43-41 against an unranked Arizona Wildcat team? Come on.
That was very, very disappointing, and it just goes to show whoever you want to attribute it to. I've seen a lot of people saying Caleb Williams is very, very much carrying Southern California with the lack of talent, but boy, was that a close game.
You know who they play this week, don't you? You're not off that part of your head. A team that locates in South Bend, Indiana.
Oh, that's right. Talk about a tough stretch of games for Notre Dame.
Oh, I know.
Brutal.
Oh, I know. And they're out of the playoff picture now, but They're still one of the best teams in the country, in my opinion, with Hartman transferring. Okay, so then you have Alabama with a hard-fought victory over a good Texas A&M team. Now, A&M is not ranked, but they're a good team. And they got a tough game this week, too. North Carolina with a slaughter of Syracuse. That's the other Heisman candidate, Drake May. Big win, 40-7. Ole Miss beat Arkansas, so Ole Miss goes from number 16 up to number 13 in this week's rankings. Louisville with the win over Notre Dame. Wow. I mean, Notre Dame, as Ryan just mentioned, really with a tough portion of the schedule. And Louisville's a good team. They're another team that don't take them for granted. They go from number 25 in the country in the AP poll up to number 14.
Yeah, and even more impressive about that, Bruce, Scott Satterfield left last year to come to Cincinnati. They're under a brand new regime, a lot of transfers to go 6-0, ranked 14. They're in a very good spot.
Right. UCLA with a win over Washington State, 25-17. How about that one? Washington State dropping from number 13 to number 19 as a result of that loss. I mentioned Notre Dame dropping the game to Louisville. They go down from number 10 to number 21. Now, here's what kills me. Duke is ranked number 17 in the AP poll. Notre Dame, with their second loss to Louisville, is now 21st. How can Duke be ranked higher than Notre Dame when Notre Dame beat them at Duke? Even though it was a hard-fought battle, and a lot of people think Duke should have won the game. Okay, that's not the bottom. 10 years from now, anybody can remember that? Explain that to me. This is the problem with rankings and why we must have a playoff. I mean, and the expanded playoff will address this, even though I'm not a big fan of the expanded playoff. And my reason is because it does lessen the importance of the regular season, where every single weekend we're going to be doing this on the Big Play Network here with Bonus Time with Drennan the whole year. I mean, every single week the scenario changes as far as the playoff picture. But how can they be ranked ahead of Notre Dame, even with the two losses? And then LSU with a win over Missouri, and they were getting killed in this game. And they came back and won against a good Missouri team. Again, Southeastern Conference. So there you have it. Now, this week in college ball, games I want you to keep an eye on, we'll address next week on the show. Alabama's at home against Arkansas. They're 5-1. They're a 19.5-point favorite. Syracuse is at Florida State. The Seminoles, of course, are undefeated, 17.5-point favorite. I think the line should be higher, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bruce. I think Florida State has been one of the most complete teams we've seen this year. No, obviously, they're 5-0, so that goes without saying. But
Indiana's at Ann Arbor to play Michigan. The Wolverines are 33.5-point favorite. Ohio State is at Purdue, 19.5-point favorite. Be careful on that game. Purdue always, for whatever reason, always plays the Buckeyes tough, and especially at West Lafayette. So be careful. I mean, Ohio State's going to win, but that could be a hard-fought, close battle. That could be. Georgia, 31.5-point favorite. Number 1 in the country is visiting Vanderbilt. Oregon, number 8 in the country, 5-0 at Washington. Number 7 in the country, 5-0. Washington, a 2.5-point favorite. That's going to be an interesting game to watch, especially because of the distance, dissection of the Pac-12 conference, the disintegration of the Pac-12 conference. And here you've got 5-6 teams in the Pac-12 this year that are good teams, really good teams. So I'm looking forward to that game, Oregon and Washington.
I am as well, Bruce. And it's interesting to see Michael Penix. This is going to be the game where he really makes his case to be a top Heisman candidate.
Iowa 5-1 is at Wisconsin, who's 4-1, and Luke Fickell and company, a big 10-point favorite in Madison. That'll be an interesting game. I wouldn't discount Ferentz in that one. 10 points looks pretty attractive to me. Bet it would typical. Miami is 4-1, ranked number 25 in the country. They're visiting North Carolina 5-0. I mentioned Drake May. The Tar Heels are a 3.5-point favorite. Missouri 5-1 at Kentucky 5-1. The Cats are a 2.5-point favorite. And Southern Cal 6-0 at Notre Dame. That's the big one. It's a primetime game Saturday night, and the Irish are a 3-point favorite against the Trojans. What do you think of that one? 3 points, huh?
I like USC, but man, do I not know after seeing what they did to Arizona. That's going to be a tough call. I expect them to bounce back. I do love Notre Dame, but man, they've just got such a brutal stretch. But at the same time, you know what? They took that tough loss to Louisville. Maybe they're going to come back with some energy.
I don't like the fact that they're a favorite. If it was closer to a pick game, or if Southern Cal was a 1 or 2 point favorite, I'd like Notre Dame a lot more. But this is going to be going down right to the wire, I believe. They've had so many monumental battles, and they traditionally play the last game of the season out in Southern Cal when it's a home game for the Trojans, but they played in mid-season when they play at South Bend. And then last but not least, UCLA 4-1 at Oregon State 5-1. Oregon State a 4-point favorite in that affair. So there's that. I also want to acknowledge the Cavaliers have started their preseason with a loss to Atlanta. No big thing. How long is Allen out? A couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's not a serious injury by any means.
Okay. I also want to make note that Olympic gold medalist Mary Lou Retton is fighting for her life, according to her daughter. She has an extreme case of pneumonia, very difficult time breathing. The daughter posted a fundraising campaign for her mother. The daughter's name is McKenna Kelly, because Mary Lou Retton has no insurance? Are you kidding me?
An Olympic medalist.
But she was on the television network. She was, financially secure, I thought. A fundraising campaign? Anyway, she's 55 years old. In 84, the LA Olympics, she won the gold in the all-around, silver in the team event and vault, and bronze in the uneven bars and floor exercise. So we wish her well. Great athlete. Baseball playoffs. Texas eliminating Baltimore in 3 games. Can you believe that? How about that?
First time, I don't know if you knew that, Bruce, first time all season the Baltimore Orioles have been swept.
Well, it's funny you say that, because Baltimore won 101 regular season games, and as Ryan said, it's the first time Baltimore has been swept, not only this season, but since May 13th through 15th in 2022. 91 multi-game regular season series without being swept, third longest in baseball history. And of the 16 previous teams to go into the postseason having not been swept in a multi-game series in the regular season, excluding 2020, which was the COVID year, only one of those teams got swept in the playoffs. Guess what team it was? The 1998 San Diego Padres, managed by Bruce Bochy, the current manager of the Texas Rangers.
Look at that little redemption.
How about that? For irony. Oh, my. And, talking about shocking sweeps, it takes me back to 1963 when the New York Yankees were a heavy favorite to beat the Dodgers when they had Koufax and Drysdale, and the Dodgers swept them in 4 games. Then that same Dodgers team, a big favorite in 1966 against the Baltimore Orioles. Brooks Robinson, who just passed away. And the Orioles swept them in the World Series. And then the Oakland Bashers, who lost in 5 games to the Dodgers in 88, swept the San Francisco Giants, the Earthquake World Series, in 89, and then in 1990, big favorite over the Cincinnati Reds of Lou Piniella, and the Reds swept them. Shocking. But this Baltimore team's a very, very, very young team. They have a very enriched farm system, and they will be back. But let me say this about Texas. And you've heard me say, again, over the years, there's no substitute for playoff experience. And Baltimore's very young. But let me say this about Texas. they have a very strong lineup. They really do. With Semien, Seager, Garcia, Heim, Young, Eovaldi. They picked up Jordan Montgomery. Both have extensive playoff experience. And Eovaldi was tremendous. And here's the thing I want to point out to you about this Texas ball club, why I give them so much credit. They accomplished what they did this year and are still alive for a possible World Series championship without DeGrom, who, when healthy, you can make a case as the best starting pitcher in the major leagues. Without DeGrom. That's amazing to me. Amazing. Similar situation with Atlanta because they didn't have Fried and Kyle Wright for most of the season. But still extraordinary. Speaking of Atlanta, as we are recording this week's version of Bonus Time with Drennan, that series is tied up at 1 apiece. And now, Arizona going into La La Land, and I'm not talking about Ryan Gosling. I can't believe it. Can you?
No.
The Dodgers?
I'm not upset about it, though.
I'm not either. Although I love Davey Roberts. I knew him well when he was with us. But I can't get over it. So, if you're watching us later in the week, that series may be over. But I'm saying the Dodgers do have a chance of coming back. I don't think, that Baltimore could do it. When they were down 2-0, I didn't see them coming back against Texas with the series shifting back to the Lone Star State. But in the case of the Dodgers, they could still come back and win that 3-game series. So we'll see if that's a possibility. And then the other one, of course, is Minnesota trailing Houston. And I think that's going to be wrapped up in 4 games. So here we go. All right, that's all the time we have for this week's version of Bonus Time with Drennan. Hope you enjoyed the show. Time flies when you're having fun, Ryan. I appreciate your support and help, and we look forward to next week's show, pal.
Yeah, no, Bruce, it's been an absolute blast, and I know just a couple shows we're doing, people are loving seeing you back, so we're all happy to have you at the Big Play family.
It's great to be here, and I want to thank everybody here at Big Play Sports for giving me this opportunity. We look forward to next week's show. You have a wonderful week. I'm Bruce Drennan on behalf of my producer, Ryan Smith. Have a good one, and until next week's show, Bonus Time with Drennan, as always, most importantly, you remember, I love you, Ohio. And I love you, Cleveland. Now here is the risk that Browns had to take with